My name is Linda. I'm 34 years old, and I never imagined I would one day be sitting in a lawyer's office, discovering that my parents had written me out of their will entirely. The leather chair under me felt stiff and cold as I stared at the document on the polished table, realizing everything our home, the business, the savings was going to my sister, Camilla. I felt like the air had been punched out of me. Years of supporting them financially and emotionally, all erased in black and white legal text. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. I grew up in Boston in what looked like a respectable middle-class family. My parents owned a small chain of specialty food stores that did moderately well. On the outside, we seemed perfect. They smiled for neighbors, charmed the community, and loved to be seen as the respectable family that worked hard and lived honestly. But behind the facade was a reality where my sister and I were never treated as equals. Camilla was 5 years older than me, and from my earliest memories, she was the golden child. Nothing she did was ever wrong. If she brought home average grades, they clapped and congratulated her like she had discovered a cure for cancer. If she expressed the slightest interest in the family business, my father beamed as if the future of the legacy was secured. My mother cooked her favorite meals, ironed her clothes, and excused her behavior even when she was openly rude. Meanwhile, I lived in her shadow. I still remember the day I brought home my first straight A report card in 3rd grade. My heart was ready to burst with excitement. My mother barely looked at it before saying, "That's nice, Linda." Did you see Camilla made the softball team? That was the story of my childhood. My achievements were background noise. Camilla's smallest efforts became headline news. When Camilla graduated from high school, my parents gave her a brand new red Mustang. I thought surely when my turn came, I would also receive something that showed pride. 4 years later, I graduated at the top of my class. I received a card with a $50 bookstore gift certificate. When I asked about a car, my father scoffed. "We can't afford such luxuries, Linda. College tuition is expensive enough." College revealed the gap even more. Camilla's tuition, dorm, meal plan, books, and monthly allowance were fully covered. When she nearly flunked out from too much partying, they paid for expensive tutors to carry her through. Meanwhile, I worked from the age of 16, weekends in a cafe, evenings in the library. I saved every cent and applied for scholarships because I knew I had to finance most of my education myself. Once, when I dared to mention the difference, my mother gave the usual line, "Camilla needs more help than you do." "You've always been so resourceful, Linda. You'll be fine." My relationship with Camilla herself was strained. As children, there was always competition, but she always seemed to win without effort. As we got older, her attitude became openly condescending. She mocked my clothes, my career path, my boyfriends. "Finance? Really, Linda, that's so boring and conventional," she laughed, even though she herself had switched majors 3 times before settling on business administration, which she never used. Camilla constantly took advantage of me. She borrowed my car for a weekend and returned it 3 weeks later with scratches and an empty tank. She begged to stay in my apartment after a breakup, just a few days, and stayed 2 months, eating my groceries and leaving without ever paying for utilities. Despite all this, I kept working hard, hoping one day my parents would notice. I graduated summa cum laude, got a job at a prestigious asset management firm, and began climbing the ladder. I bought them thoughtful gifts, called regularly, and went to family dinners even when I left feeling like I didn't belong. But nothing changed. In their eyes, Camilla was flawless. I was adequate. Adulthood came fast, and with it the belief that maybe, finally, things would change. I told myself that once I was out of the house, earning my own living, maybe my parents would start seeing me as equal to Camilla. I threw myself into building a career in finance. I started as an analyst at a respected investment firm, and I quickly earned a reputation for being hardworking, reliable, and precise. While my peers partied on weekends, I stayed late in the office, reviewing numbers, learning strategies, asking questions that others were too afraid to ask. Promotions followed, first to senior analyst, then to portfolio manager, years ahead of schedule. On the surface, my life looked impressive. I wore tailored suits, managed accounts worth millions, and could walk into any room with the confidence of someone who had earned her place. But beneath it all was the same yearning to finally hear my parents say, "We're proud of you, Linda." That moment never came. At family dinners, I would share exciting news: a promotion, a major client win, a financial award. My father would nod absently and then turn to Camilla to ask about her latest hobby. She had taken up jewelry making one month, and they showered her with admiration for her creativity. Another time, she tried opening an online boutique, which failed within weeks, but my parents praised her entrepreneurial spirit. When I told them I had been entrusted with a portfolio of $50 million, they smiled politely, then shifted to discussing Camilla's new yoga instructor. I laughed it off at first, but each dismissal cut a little deeper. Then came 2008. The financial crisis hit hard, and my parents' stores nearly collapsed. Customers cut back on luxuries, sales plummeted, and the business barely stayed afloat. One evening, my mother called, her voice trembling. "Linda, I hate to ask this, but we can't cover the mortgage this month. Business is terrible. We don't know what to do." I didn't hesitate. I transferred $5,000, telling her not to worry about paying me back. That one transfer became 2, then 3. Before long, I had set up automatic payments to cover their mortgage because the calls of panic came every month. Then came my father's heart attack. He needed a specialist, expensive medication, and weeks of recovery. Insurance covered some of it, but not all. I stepped in. Not long after, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. Surgery, chemo, aftercare, all costly. Again, I paid. I told myself it was what any daughter would do. Family comes first. But the truth was, I was draining my own future to sustain theirs. The condo I dreamed of buying slipped further away. I cut back on retirement savings. I skipped vacations, telling friends, maybe next year. And where was Camilla? She made appearances at the hospital, taking photos of herself holding Mom's hand, posting captions like, "Family is everything." She brought flowers, maybe some takeout, and then disappeared as soon as money came up. If I dared to suggest she help, she looked genuinely shocked. "But Linda, you make so much more than me. You can afford it. It's just easier for you." The audacity was staggering. But my parents never noticed the imbalance. They would thank me quickly for covering bills, then gush over Camilla's effort for driving 2 hours to visit. In their minds, my money was expected. Camilla's presence was a gift. Slowly, my savings drained into their mortgage, medical bills, and even Camilla's rent when she needed help after quitting yet another job. She promised she'd pay me back with interest. That promise evaporated the moment I handed over the cash. I remember one Thanksgiving vividly. I had just been promoted to senior analyst, a huge leap in my career. I announced it at dinner, proud and hopeful. My father nodded and said, "That's nice, Linda." Then he turned to Camilla and asked about her beer brewing hobby. Within minutes, the table was buzzing about how Camilla might start her own brewery. They offered her investment money they had never once considered putting toward any of my ambitions. Driving home that night, I realized something devastating. No matter how high I climbed, I would never escape their blind favoritism. I was their safety net, their problem solver, their convenient solution. Camilla was their star, and still I couldn't stop. Each time the phone rang with a new crisis, I paid. When my father needed medicine not covered by insurance, I covered $1,000 a month. When my mother needed in-home care, I hired the nurse. When Camilla couldn't make rent, I wired her the money. The total sum was staggering, though I didn't calculate it then. What I did feel was the toll, the dark circles under my eyes, the constant anxiety, the sense that my own life was paused indefinitely. Friends told me I looked exhausted. My best friend Tara warned, "Linda, you're setting yourself on fire to keep them warm." I waved it off. Their family, they'd do the same for me. Looking back, I don't know if I ever believed that, or if I was just trying to convince myself. The imbalance became so normal that I stopped questioning it. I kept waiting for the day they would finally say, "Thank you, Linda. We see you." But that day never came. Instead, what came was the call from the lawyer that would shatter whatever illusions I had left. It was a crisp autumn morning when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Is this Linda?" A man's voice asked, calm, professional. "Yes, this is she. My name is Jeffrey. I'm your parents' attorney. They recently updated their estate plans, and I'd like to meet with you to go over the changes. My stomach tightened. Is everything all right? Are my parents okay? They're fine, he assured me. This is just standard procedure after significant changes to their will. I scheduled the appointment for the next afternoon. The rest of that day, anxiety gnawed at me. Why hadn't my parents mentioned updating their will? Why involve me now, after years of silence about such matters? A tiny flicker of hope whispered. Maybe they were finally recognizing my role. Maybe they wanted me to be involved in the business officially. Maybe at last I was being seen. The lawyer's office was sleek, all glass and polished wood. I was led into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. On the table sat a thick folder with my parents' names neatly printed on the label. After the formalities, Jeffrey cleared his throat. Your parents recently made substantial changes to their estate plans. I thought it best to meet with you so there's no confusion. My pulse quickened. What kind of changes? He opened the folder and slid the papers toward me. They've decided to leave their entire estate to your sister, Camilla. The family home, the stores, the investments, the accounts, everything. The words struck like a physical blow. My mouth went dry. I don't understand. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake, he said gently. The documents are clear and legally binding. Your parents were of sound mind when they signed them. My voice cracked. But why? Did they say why? They indicated that they believe Camilla requires more financial support than you do. They mentioned your successful career several times and expressed confidence in your ability to provide for yourself. The bitter irony made my throat burn. My success, the thing I thought might finally earn their pride, was now the reason I was cut out completely. So because I worked hard and became independent, I'm being punished. I wouldn't phrase it as punishment, he said carefully. But that was exactly what it was. There was one more twist. Not only was everything left to Camilla, but she was also named power of attorney and healthcare proxy. If my parents became incapacitated, I wouldn't even have a say in their medical care. When I asked if Camilla knew, Jeffrey hesitated, then nodded. Yes, she was consulted during the process. So she had known. She had sat in meetings about my erasure, nodded along, maybe even encouraged it, and never said a word to me. I left the office numb, walking the streets in a daze. 3 missed calls from Camilla blinked on my phone. I ignored them. By the time I got home, she was waiting outside my apartment, leaning against the wall, scrolling on her phone like she was casually early for brunch. There you are, she said, as though nothing was unusual. How long have you known? I demanded, bypassing any greeting. About the will. A few months, she shrugged. Mom and Dad wanted my input on some of the details. And you didn't think I deserved to know. I figured they'd tell you when they were ready. Or the lawyer would. Which obviously he did. She followed me inside, making herself comfortable on my couch. Why Camilla? I asked, standing over her. Why everything to you and nothing to me? She stretched her arms across the back of the couch, her tone infuriatingly casual. Look, Linda, it just makes sense. You've got a career. You're making 6 figures. You've always prided yourself on being independent. I'm still trying to figure things out. The business needs someone who's fully committed, not someone already established elsewhere. So my stability is being held against me while your irresponsibility is rewarded. She gave a little smirk. That's one way of looking at it. But Mom and Dad just recognize you don't need their help. You've made that obvious, always bragging about promotions, bonuses, new clients. Bragging. My voice rose. I was trying to make them proud, Camilla. Well, now's your chance to prove you don't need anyone. Her words cut like knives. The version of me she had sold to our parents was clear, cold, career-obsessed, self-sufficient to the point of not deserving support. Meanwhile, she was the fragile dreamer who needed endless rescuing. I asked if she had encouraged them to cut me out. She stood abruptly. They made their own decisions. I just gave my opinion. I pointed to the door. Get out. You always take things so personally, she scoffed, grabbing her bag. It's just practical planning, not a declaration of love. But that's exactly what it was. The next day, I drove to my parents' house demanding answers. My father sat with his newspaper, my mother in the kitchen making lunch, as if everything were normal. When I mentioned the will, they exchanged guilty looks. "We were going to tell you," my father said. After everything was finalized, I snapped. After I had no say. "Linda, there's no need to be dramatic," my mother said. "Camilla needs our support more than you do. I've been supporting this family for years." My voice shook. "Who do you think paid your mortgage, your medical bills? Who hired your nurse, bought your medication, saved your business? And you leave me nothing." My mother's lips thinned. "That was temporary assistance during difficult times. This is about the long-term future." "Temporary." I nearly laughed. Tens of thousands of dollars year after year, and that counts for nothing. My father spoke in his usual calm tone, as though explaining something obvious. "You've built a secure life for yourself. We're proud of that. But Camilla hasn't had the same opportunities." Opportunities. She had every opportunity. She was handed cars, tuition, allowances, second chances. I had scraped by on my own. I felt like I was arguing with a brick wall. And then I saw it. In their office, a file cabinet slightly ajar. Inside was a folder containing meticulous records of every transfer I had made. Mortgage payments, credit cards, medical bills. Next to it was another folder. Documents showing how some of my contributions had been invested into Camilla's ventures. Failed boutiques, half-baked business ideas. All funded by me while I postponed my dreams. It wasn't just favoritism, it was exploitation. I photographed everything with my phone. And as I drove home, rage surged through me, hot and cleansing. For years, I had believed that if I worked hard enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, they would finally see me, finally love me the way they loved Camilla. But that was never going to happen. And that night, sitting at my kitchen table, I knew something with absolute clarity. The Linda who bent, who sacrificed, who kept waiting for approval. She was gone. The first thing I noticed after I cut the money off wasn't relief, it was quiet, unnerving, humming, unfamiliar quiet. My phone stopped living face down on my desk like a little bomb. Evenings stopped being triage checklists. I could pick a lamp for the living room without calculating whether a pharmacy auto debit would bounce. I ate dinner with both hands instead of with one hand scrolling through panic texts. For 2 weeks, I convinced myself the quiet meant we were all adjusting like adults. On the 15th day, the doorbell broke it. I thought it was the coffee table I'd ordered. It was Camilla. Hair unbrushed, eyeliner smudged into gray crescents, a coat thrown over a hoodie like she had dressed on the run. She didn't wait for a greeting. "You happy?" She said. "Is this what you wanted?" I held the door but didn't step aside. "Hello to you, too. The suppliers want cash, payroll is due Friday, the electric bill is overdue, and the bank froze the line. That's this week. Next week is worse, they can't sleep. Mom keeps throwing up from nerves, Dad can't sit still. You did this." "I didn't cancel the electricity," I said, steady. "I canceled my transfers." "That's different. You knew exactly what would happen." She pushed a palm against the door like she might force her way in. "You've been propping them up for years. And now you just, what? Walk away because your feelings are hurt about some paperwork." I felt the old script tug at me like a leash. Apologize, explain, rescue. I let it tug and didn't move. "My feelings are hurt," I said, "and the paperwork has legal consequences." They wrote me out, Camilla, entirely. The house, the accounts, the stores, the decision-making, all to you. And they did it while I was still paying their mortgage. She rolled her eyes like I'd told a boring story. "Oh my God, drama queen. You make 6 figures. You live in a condo with a concierge. You bought a blender that costs more than my car insurance. You do not need Mom and Dad's money. Needing and deserving are not synonyms. What you deserve is to help your family," she snapped. "That's what family is. I've been helping my family since I was 16. I just can't be your business model anymore." Her mouth curled, teeth flashing. "You think you're better than me?" No, I said. I think I'm done being used by you. She sucked in a breath like a slap had landed, then laughed without humor. Try sleeping tonight after they lose the store. See how done you feel then. She spun on a heel and stalked down the hall, and for the first time in years, I didn't run after her. The quiet came back. It wasn't gentle anymore. It felt like wind after a door slams. A week later, my parents arrived without warning. They had never set foot in the condo. They disapproved of high rises and monthly dues on principle. My father looked smaller, edges sanded down by exhaustion. My mother's perfume smelled like lemon and starch. It always did when she wanted to look composed. Linda, my father said in the vestibule, we need a conversation. In the living room, I said, and I led them to the couch and sat in the chair opposite so the coffee table was a polite barrier. My hands made a nest of my cardigan, then flattened it, then let go. My father folded his fingers. We are in an untenable position. The bank won't extend credit without your regular inflows on the account history. The vendors want cash on delivery. The accountant says that without support, we have 45 days, maybe 60. My mother cut in before I could answer. We aren't asking for everything to go back exactly the way it was. Just until we stabilize. A few months. We would never put this on you if there were any other option. You put this on me when you had plenty of other options, I said softly, and her mouth twitched. You put this on me when you decided you preferred the illusion of stability to the work of it. She stiffened. You're being cruel. No, I said. I'm being clear. For years I paid bills I didn't incur, and I did it because I love you. I don't regret that. But you rewrote the story to erase me while I was still writing checks. You made Camilla the heir to work she didn't do. My father breathed out through his nose. We thought you understood. Camilla is close to the business. She is present. Presence isn't performance, I said. Standing in the store for a photo isn't management. She buys equipment we don't need, promises service we can't deliver, alienates the only competent floor manager you had because he corrected her. You call that passion. I call it expensive. He looked at the city through the window behind me. We are not young anymore. I know, I said, and felt the ache of it. And that makes my point sharper, not softer. You chose succession by praise instead of succession by competence. You chose the daughter who made you feel good over the daughter who made the numbers work. And you only admit the numbers are real when I pay them. My mother's voice thinned. Do you want to see us foreclosed? Do you want our name ruined? Is that the end game, Linda? I don't have an end game, I said. I have a boundary. There's a difference. Tears glassed her eyes. She had the kind of tears that made people scramble to fix things. As a teenager, I had scrambled for those tears like a fireman. As a woman, I sat and watched them fall and kept my hands in my lap. We made mistakes, my father said finally, and the words surprised me because he didn't usually traffic in plural responsibility. But we cannot climb out of them now without help. You can, I said, but not with the same rules. I leaned forward. Sell a store. Cut inventory. Renegotiate leases. Hire a manager who isn't related to you and give them actual authority. Stop buying inventory because Camilla saw a trend video. Stop calling your daughter a pipeline. Then yes, maybe you can. You're enjoying this, my mother whispered. I'm grieving, I said, and the truth of it startled me. I'm grieving the family I wanted and the role I played to bargain for it. They left with stiff goodbyes that weren't good at all. The door clicked, the elevator hummed. The quiet sat down again. It lasted 40 hours. Then the calls began. From cousins I hadn't seen in 3 holidays, from a godmother who never remembered my birthday, from the neighbor who used to slip me popsicles over the fence when I was 8. The message rotated, but the melody held. How could you do this? You know your parents aren't well. Sacrifices were made for you. This is not who you are. I pictured Camilla in the back of the store behind the bakery case, dialing and explaining in her careful, injured voice that she was doing everything and I was doing nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I answered with a sentence I had rehearsed. This is a private matter. Please respect my boundaries. If the caller persisted, I said it again. If they persisted twice, I hung up and blocked. Hung. A surprising number of people stopped at the word boundaries like it was a foreign language they didn't speak. The numbers started telling the story no one could spin. 3 months in, the notice went up that the downtown location would close. My parents wrote a post about strategic consolidation. The comments were polite and then quietly vicious. 6 months in, the second store went dark. The landlord found a juice franchise with neon signage to take the space. The flagship, the one with the old world tile my mother loved, limped on. The tile cracked in one corner. Camilla posted a photo with a caption about vintage charm. Someone replied with a picture of a mousetrap. The night the house sold, Camilla texted me, "Happy now, you wanted consequences." Here they are. I typed and deleted 6 replies. I finally sent nothing. I set the phone face down and let my heart climb in my chest like a fist. I walked the condo in a slow loop. Living room, kitchen, balcony. The plants I had learned to water before dawn. The dent in the hallway paint where the movers bumped the bookshelf. It was a life with my fingerprints on it, not anyone else's. It felt good, and it felt like standing in a church after a funeral. The next morning, I did something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. I went to work and told my boss I needed the afternoon off, not for a crisis, not for an emergency, but for maintenance. He blinked at the word, then nodded, and I took myself to a coffee shop with paper cups and soft jazz and wrote a list in a blank notebook titled, "What Belongs to Me?" I wrote, mornings, my body, the right to spend a paycheck without shame, friendships that aren't transactions, the right to say not mine when someone hands me a flaming bag and tells me it's my duty to hold it. At dusk, the doorbell rang again. I thought, neighbor, it was my parents. No appointment. No warning. They stood too close together in the hall, a single unit forged by fear. "We sold the house," my father said without preamble. "We signed. It's done." "I know," I said. "I saw the listing come down." My mother's chin trembled. "Are you satisfied?" "No," I said. "I'm many things. Satisfied isn't one of them." I stepped aside and let them in. Tea. "We can't stay," my father said, but they followed me to the kitchen anyway. I poured water. We stood while the kettle took forever to boil. "We felt humiliated," my mother said finally, and the word held more truth than any accusation she had thrown. Friends asked questions. "Your aunt suggested we move in with her. Do you know what it is to be asked that?" "I do," I said. "People asked me to move in with boyfriends I didn't love so I could save money while I paid your mortgage." Humiliation is an equal opportunity employer. She looked at the floor. "We were unfair," she said, and the admission slotted into place like a puzzle piece I had lost under a couch. I thought if I kept believing in Camilla's potential, it would become performance. "Hope is not a business plan," I said gently. "Not for stores. Not for daughters." My father's voice went quieter. "We spoke to the lawyer." He coughed like the words were dry. "We're reconsidering some decisions." "I don't want a carrot because the stick broke," I said. "If you change the papers, change them because you learned something, not because you want to bail out." He met my eyes. "We learned something," he said. For the first time, I believed him. They didn't ask for money that night. They didn't ask me to come back to the store. They asked if I would come for dinner the following week in the small condo they had rented, and I said yes, with the kind of caution you use when a feral cat sits on your porch and purrs. The next days belonged to practicalities again, my own, not theirs. I finally booked the doctor's appointment I'd been rescheduling for months. I went to the plant shop and asked what to do about the brown tips on my pothos, and the woman with soil under her nails showed me how to trim a leaf without hurting the hole. I walked to work once instead of taking the train and noticed the bakery that had opened 2 blocks over. I bought a croissant and ate it on the sidewalk. Butter on my lip, sun on my face. 40 minutes where the only thing anyone needed from me was exact change. Camilla didn't text that week. She called. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice in the recording had 2 layers. The public one, bright and brittle. The private one underneath, cracked. "I don't even know what to say to you anymore," she began. "You broke everything, but maybe it was already broken and you just stopped hiding it." A breath. I can't fix this. I thought I could. I thought if I posted enough and smiled enough and pretended enough, the numbers would listen. They don't. I saved the voicemail. Not to replay the hurt, but because it was the first time my sister had addressed numbers like they were reality instead of rudeness. I didn't call back. Not yet. Boundaries aren't punishments, they're fences that tell the garden where the world ends. Dinner at my parents' condo happened on a Wednesday. The furniture was smaller, the pictures were mostly still in boxes. My mother made pasta in a pan that wasn't hers, and it tasted almost but not quite like the recipe from my childhood. We spoke like tourists in each other's cities. Careful, curious, not fluent. "Do you remember the old delivery guy who used to bring the bread?" My father asked suddenly. "He called me last night. He said the new place on Main asked for our route. He wanted to know if I minded." He laughed softly, as if I have a route to protect. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "That he should do what keeps his van full and his family fed," he said, "and that no route belonged to me in the first place. It belongs to whoever wakes up at 4 and drives it." We ate in the quiet after that, and I realized I was breathing normally. When I left, my mother hugged me in the doorway. She had always hugged tightly like possession. This time, she hugged like a person who was asking, not taking. "I'm sorry," she said into my shoulder. And then, because old habits die last, for parts of it. "For the parts you can name today," I said. "The rest can wait." On the street, the night air held the city's dull heat. I stood by my car and looked up at their window. A plant sat there in a plain pot, backlit, their first attempt in a smaller life to keep something alive. When I got home, I wrote one more line in the notebook. "I do not have to bleed to belong." Then I closed it, washed my face, set my alarm, and slept. Not the sleep of someone who had won, the sleep of someone who had chosen. In the morning, my phone buzzed at 6, a text from Camilla. No blame this time, no accusation, just a sentence that sat up straight and looked me in the eye. "Can you meet me at the storefront at noon? I need to return the keys." I wrote back, "Yes." Then I put the phone down and made coffee and stood at the window while the kettle boiled, listening to the room be quiet and knowing the quiet belonged to me.